The gap in 2009 was 17%. The gap now in 2018 at 23%. So a growing gap. Why? So we looked and we speculated and we thought a little bit. The one thing that is happening in the media, and you're all aware of it, is that that middle is becoming decimated. So you have a few very senior people at the top, and then you have a battalion of quite junior people, mostly doing social media, it appears, yeah? And that is expressing itself in this gap that we're seeing.
What's new is that the cyberbullying continues. The numbers have equaled out. We're not playing numbers games anymore. But there's a feminist backlash. So these kinds of stories, because women have risen in power, men have become insecure, and that is why women have experienced the backlash that they have. So what companies would subtly do then is, that's why I think the gender wage gap is increasing. Because companies then will subtly try and keep women in what they call their place, by making sure that if Matlatsi and Ferrier are editors, more experienced than so-and-so, let's just pay him so much more than they would pay you two.
So I think the research is important to at least get kind of insights into what is actually happening in the media house, but I think more importantly, hopefully it says to the younger journalists that are suffering, that are struggling, what then do we do? And that is the challenge for us as Salit. How do we make sure that those women find a voice? How do we make sure that the sexism in the newsroom is actually addressed? How do we ensure that the media houses actually have policies that favor women? How do we actually make sure that they tell us how much are they paying us? What is the gender gap? So it's important for that. I think the next step is what we actually do with that information.
I think the Glassman research, collection of the data itself, it was a mammoth task, and some media houses are actually not very responsive. I had a researcher who was chased out of a community media house, and another researcher who went to media house and told her that this has nothing to do with them. So I think people can quite see the importance of the whole research and what we're trying to do. But with a lot of help from SANEF, we managed to get quite a lot of people to answer the questionnaires.
Not only was there a problem getting the questionnaires, there was a huge problem getting wage data. But all of us in this room, at one time or the other, have probed, government finances, private sector finances. But when it comes to our own house, we don't want to be transparent about that. So, I think these are questions that we need to think about, because if we're going to call for transparency in our society, then we too need to be willing to be transparent about these things. In the UK, when the BBC and the Guardian and so forth, when eventually there was this push and all the data began to come out, then all of a sudden people woke up and said, wow, actually we have a problem here. And I think the wages, more than anything, encapsulates all of this. Obviously, it's but one indicator, but it's quite a good one in terms of where are we on equality. And I think that should be a very strong recommendation to come out of this.
I think if it was the same in government SARS, when they were refusing to release wage data, then the media would be saying, what do they have to hide? So here's the question, what does the media have to hide? And I think the bigger question, though, is this kind of misogyny and sexism in newsroom is sometimes reflected in content, in headlines, in the content of stories.
I was wondering if the sexism and misogyny is internal or external. Where are women journalists experiencing it most?
So, okay, I can speak, about my experiences at the SABC, as you mentioned. I think for me the biggest challenge was, it's difficult to just do your work as an editor, because first I'm seen as a woman who can be manipulated and intimidated into changing my story, or into not interviewing people that I have set up to interview. And not being given reasons. Because I think for me, what was really, really hard and painful was So one of my bosses, for instance, would not say to me, I don't want you to interview this person because this is my view of this person, or I think it will skew your story. It was always like, that person is a non-entity, you know, don't interview them, you know. And I would say, can you give me editorial reasons, you know, based on news value, why I should not interview a person? So I always felt like I was not considered as a journalist, but as someone who can be just, you know, just intimidated and told what to do, like I was not thinking for myself, you know. So I think that for me that was the biggest frustration.
Really scary and something we really have to work hard at to expose and minimize, because obviously a lot of women journalists don't like to come forward on it because they feel it takes away from their main job of being a journalist. They then are seen as a victim, not a journalist, if you like.
Come from my newsroom and go into the workspace and then come back with stories of harassment from older, experienced women. It's bullying, it's harassment, it's ongoing, it's there, and we don't talk about it.
All the time. I've worked under several female editors and nearly every single one of them was a bully. I mean, to the point where they would embarrass you in front of your male colleagues. You want to send out on a story and they would say things to you like, oh, okay, why don't you just put on a short skirt? Go get the story. Wear something tight or low cut, or put on a, like, and the editor said to me, I can't remember the story, but you had to go to the hospital for something. She says, why don't you put on a nurse's uniform? And it was in front of your male colleagues, and you know, people were laughing, so, and how do you respond? So I just responded, I said, well, why do I have to be a nurse? Why can't I be a doctor?
I mean, I think I wrote my story many moons ago about my experience in Genderling's Her Story. And I don't think it has changed, but I think there needs to be pressure on the owners of media to take the issue of gender mainstreaming, cyber misogyny, and all of the issues that came out of the study very, very seriously. I would think that SANAF, and it's something we could discuss, should go and engage with the publishers themselves and the owners. Because in my experience, if the CEOs don't buy into it and don't put the funding there and never make available the opportunities for women to go on training, then it just becomes another research.
Just reflecting on the comments that were made a moment ago about, you know, male and female editors and so on. It is not about changing a few individuals, it is about changing a system, yeah? There are good women editors, there are bad women editors, there are good male editors, there are bad male editors, yeah? So the media itself, I think we have a particular kind of job in the media that already, you know, doesn't entirely lend itself, yeah, to a good, peaceful environment. We work on deadlines, yeah? The paper has to be produced, the news bulletin has to be produced, and so there's almost a bit of a quasi-military environment that you have in there. And so it means that you have to step back. Policies, people don't know about them, commissions of inquiry, you know, when does the media actually take the time to step back and reflect on how it does its work and how it grows its people and so on?
I interviewed one of the journalists at a publication based in Rosebank, I shall not mention it by name, and one of the questions I asked was if they had a policy on gender discrimination, and the journalist responded, no, there wasn't, but if it's there, then it's probably gathering dust somewhere. So a few years later, we're still stuck in the same situation. So also it puts, I think, pressure on us as the MDDA to rethink the whole issue of transformation. I mean, ours is to, you know, address issues of ownership within the industry, but I think from this research, I think we need to go beyond just addressing issue of ownership within the sector, and it's quite disappointing as well to hear that a journalist was kicked out of a community media radio station or publication. So we welcome this great report, and I fully agree. I mean, there's much more work to be done.